That's the fun part about money laundering is, I can say, listen, I've observed the activity in your account, and as a result, it has all these flags of money laundering, and then this is why these red flags exist, and this is why people have moved to move money this way. So it's a very subjective view.
Can you walk us through what it's like preparing for and delivering expert witness testimony in a money laundering case?
It took me 4 years and 2 really good Crown attorneys as mentors to get me to where I felt I was comfortable testifying. When I'm talking about money laundering, I'm talking about it's a subjective, look at how you're moving your money and how that has indicators of money laundering.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of On the Stand with Ashish Arun, the podcast where we explore the law, practice and business of expert witness testimony. I'm your host Ashish, and today we have an extraordinary guest who bridges the world of law enforcement and financial crime prevention. Meet Dwayne King, or as he proudly calls himself, an AML geek. Dwayne's fascination with financial crime prevention fueled his journey to become a certified Canadian AML expert. With over 35 years of combined experience in law enforcement and the financial sector, Dwayne has become one of Canada's most sought-after experts in money laundering and financial crime investigations. His journey began in the 1990s with the Toronto Police Service, where he spent 26 years, including nearly 9 as a proceeds of crime investigator in the Asset Forfeiture Unit. He led major investigations into organized crime, international drug trafficking, and complex fraud structure. He's a court-qualified money laundering expert, having been accepted as an expert witness in numerous criminal and civil proceedings since 2012. Today, he is the Chief Anti-Money Laundering Officer at WFCU Credit Union, where he oversees the entire AML, counter-terrorist financing, and regulatory compliance programs. He holds multiple professional designations including CAMS, CFE, CFCS, and CAMS-FI, and is a proud recipient of a FinTrack Partnership Award. So on that note, let's welcome Dwayne to the podcast. Hi Dwayne, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. So Dwayne, you've had a remarkable career transition from Toronto Police to becoming what you call an anti-money laundering geek. So what initially sparked your interest in financial crimes, and how did you end up specializing in money laundering investigations?
That's interesting. What sparked my interest was after almost 18 years of frontline uniform policing, kicking in doors, chasing bad guys, playing cops and robbers, and having a lot of fun. I got an opportunity to work a day shift job in the proceeds of crime unit. My daughter was 7. It seemed like a good opportunity to actually see her grow and not doing shift work. And that's why I got into proceeds of crime. So I joined the unit, and they often say your journey is driven by who you work for. And I had the pleasure of working with one of the best detectives I've ever worked with, who saw a vision for the office, a vision for the proceeds of crime unit as it was then known, and it transferred over to the asset forfeiture unit. And his vision drove me to really understand the value of asset forfeiture, of money laundering investigations, of really understanding that by arresting a drug dealer, you're doing nothing. By taking the drug money, you're doing everything. And then they invested money in me, the Toronto Police Service did, to gain enough knowledge and training and experience to become an expert witness. It wasn't mandatory, but I found that to be a good challenge. I was never a good student. I got kicked out of university, so I was never a good studier. I'm not sure that's even a real word, but I was never a good studier. I didn't enjoy school, but I saw the value in this. It was very practical, very real to me. And so I spent the 9 years in the proceeds of crime unit, which then became the asset forfeiture unit as part of this financial crime, building out that area of expertise. And that area of expertise is not just learning how bad guys move money. Mm-hmm. That's one side of the coin, right? And so you have to learn how the good guys move money. You have to understand the difference between the illegal movement of money and the legal movement of money, so you can see the difference and you can talk about the difference. And that's why it was really fascinating for me. I saw the policing side. But the deeper I got down this journey of becoming an expert witness, the more I started to understand FinTrack regulations, global compliance. I started to understand more about globally how money moves, how it moves in Canada. The Bank of Canada produces a number of really great papers on how money moves. So learning that was really quite fascinating because it added to that piece of, okay, I know what criminals do, but now I'm starting to understand how legal business works.
Again, that brings me to my next question. So how is the approach different when it comes to fighting financial crime as a police officer and as a bank's AML department?
I think I think they complement each other, or I'm going to say they should complement each other, but we're not quite there yet. So in a utopian world, right, you've got your bank investigators that see inside the vault of privacy, right? So you see the inside vault. You see exactly what's happening in Dwayne King's accounts. From the policing perspective, you see what Dwayne King is doing outside of that vault of privacy, but know that Dwayne has an account at whatever financial institution it is. And so it's hard for either side to really get a good picture, right? Because in order for the police to see inside that vault of secrecy, they have to go to the court, they have to have reasonable grounds, they have to prove to the judge that you're going to or could be committing a criminal offense, that evidence for that criminal offense could be inside that bank's vault of secrecy, and that you're allowed to open that vault, right? So it's a bit of a hurdle. And when you get that information, trying to make sense of it, right? Reading bank statements, understanding flow of funds is something that's typically outside the purview of a police officer. We're not accountants. We're not forensic accountants. We're not bankers. We're policemen.
Today's episode of On the Stand is brought to you by Xlightum, the AI-powered platform where attorneys find expert witnesses and experts grow their practice. Every week, hundreds of new experts join Xlightum, giving attorneys instant access to qualified witnesses without any finder's fee or markups. Need someone else to handle the vetting? Our concierge service does it all. You only pay when you retain an expert we present. So whether you are searching yourself or letting us do the heavy lifting, Xlightum makes expert discovery fast and smarter. Visit Xlightum, that's exlitem.com, to find your next expert witness today. What's your take on the collaboration that you see, or the lack of collaboration that you see between banks and police departments when they are working on the same case?
Yeah, I mean, want to have privacy in our banking, and we don't want to give it up, even if sometimes it helps criminals. And so we need more private-to-private information sharing between banks. We need more law enforcement to bank to law enforcement sharing. And we're getting there. We're slowly transitioning to some laws. The U.S. have had their laws, their 314A and 314B laws in the U.S. for a number of years. But Canada is slowly getting there. But we really love our privacy, especially around financial transactions. And that really just helps the criminals. And we're not willing to give it up, even though we know it's helping the criminals. So we have this constant battle of what the banks are willing to tell the police, what the police can get from the banks. And if you're not sharing that information, you're really just seeing one side.
Yeah. So 2012 is when you worked as an expert witness for the first time.
Yes.
So can you walk us through what it's like preparing for and delivering expert witness testimony in a money laundering case?
It's fun. It took me 4 years and 2 really good Crown attorneys as mentors to get me to where I felt I was comfortable testifying. Because it's an opinion, but it's not an accountant's opinion is, okay, money A went from bank B to bank C, right? There's a documented paper trail. When I'm talking about money laundering, it's a subjective look at how you're moving your money and how that has indicators of money laundering, right? And so it's a lot of fun, because anytime you get to really try to expand your thoughts into words and then testify in court as an expert, it's a fascinating challenge. But it's trying to convince the trier of fact, the judge, that listen, these are not just Dwayne's beliefs. Right. Yeah. There's a lot of training experience. There's a lot of globally documented information that's supporting Dwayne's beliefs or Dwayne's opinion. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's the fun part about money laundering is, I can say, listen, I've observed the activity in your account. And as a result, it has all these flags of money laundering. And then this is why these red flags exist. And this is why people have moved to move money this way. So it's a very, subjective view. It's quite fun.
I can imagine explaining these complex financial crimes to a jury would be especially tricky. And even if it's a non-jury trial, even to explain it to a judge won't be as simple. And on top of that, you bring in aggressive cross-examination from the other side, who are trying to discredit your expertise, who are trying to discredit the materials you are relying on. And they are trying to say that, okay, no, this is not, maybe Dwayne saying that because he feels that it's right, but the experience he's relying on is not adequate, the methodology he's relying on is not reliable. So how do you tackle the cross-examination and the attacks on your credibility?
And they come all the time,
Yeah.
right? They 100% come all the time. I remember this one time I was testifying, gave my opinion. The defense counsel said, "Are you aware of the opinion you gave at the case in Durham region?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "You know the results of your opinion and what the," I said, "No." He goes, "Well, if I were to suggest you the judge completely disagreed with your entire opinion and threw the case out, what would your response be?" And I'm like, "I don't have a response." Right? Because I don't know. Like, I'm not going to answer a question I don't know the answer to. I'm not going to guess. And I have no opinion. It was my opinion at the time. I stick by it. It turns out that was actually a suggestion was not correct. The judge threw the case out, but it wasn't because of my testimony. Right? So, but it was a suggestion, right? But he's trying to rile you up. I don't want to get riled up. You're not going to get me riled up. And so that's the number one. I never take an ego to the stand. Because if you bring your ego to the stand, you're going to start to get angry. And I always bring my true self to the stand. Understanding that this is my opinion, but it's the trier of fact, it's the judge's job to determine how much weight he wants to give to that opinion, whether that opinion will sway any of his evidence. I'm just telling the judge, in my opinion, as a court-qualified expert, what I believe is happening here. I'm there to educate the trier of fact. I'm there to help them see what I see. And so it's almost as a teaching moment, right? Because so it becomes quite valuable, quite enjoyable. And I remember I was testifying once, and I'm not sure I would recommend this to anyone else, but it was honest to who I was in a human, right? So the defense counsel says, "Officer, you've got all these courses on your CV. I'm going to suggest to you that this course really it had an hour of over 3 days of proceeds of crime and money laundering." Yeah. And this course only had 2 hours. Yeah. I'm going to suggest they had no value or just trying to make your CV look bigger. And I said, "Well, Your Honor," I said, "to me, those are like the tomato and lettuce on a hamburger. Yeah. They don't make the hamburger. You can have a hamburger without it, but it adds value. It makes the hamburger better." And actually, this was the testimony I gave. But it wasn't as a joke, right? It was a genuine good comparison in my mind of why those lettuce and tomatoes in my CV were valuable to that burger, which is my entire expertise. Now, I wouldn't suggest that to a lot of people unless you're honest up there, and the judge can see the honesty. They see your true self coming out. They see you not trying to hide who you are or be some pseudo intellect, because I'm not, right? I don't have a PhD. I haven't written books, right? I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. And the judges really appreciate that level of honesty.
Yeah. So you've also testified on very specific topics like bundling of cash. And I was like looking at your CV, and that's where I spotted this. And then on lawful versus unlawful use of currency. That's also something that you have testified on before. So how do you establish patterns? And this is for the benefit of attorneys or experts who are in the AML domain. That how do you establish patterns that differentiate legitimate business transactions from money laundering? Like, are there any telltale signs that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I really go by the belief there's sort of three things that everyone thinks about when they're moving or value. Yeah. It doesn't have to be specifically one. It's the speed, the cost, and the security of those transactions. Okay. And any time that you violate those, because if you, let's say you wanted to send money to a relative out of country, right? You're going to usually find the cheapest way possible, right? Or you're going to find the fastest way possible, because the cheapest way possible may not be fast enough. Yeah. But if you're willing to go with the most expensive, slowest route, you have to ask yourself why. If you're not choosing the fastest method, you have to ask yourself why. And so this is where it becomes quite fascinating. Because when you look at criminals want the same thing. They want speed, cost, and security, right? They're no different. But they can't move it that way because their fear of getting, if it's just physical cash, getting stolen by other criminals, getting seized by the police. They're worried about, if it's through a business, they're worried about, tax implications. They're worried about it not folding nicely into the business book so it stands out. So they have all these other concerns that get in the way of that speed, cost, and security. And so you look at that speed, cost, and security, and you look at a transaction. Did it make sense to send this money from bank A to bank B to bank C? Why would you send it from bank A to bank C? Doesn't make any sense. Because a normal business transaction is the most direct route, the cheapest route. Why does a criminal do it? Because they're trying to hide and obfuscate the trail of funds.
And how has cryptocurrency changed it? I know that you're a certified Bitcoin professional as well. So, have you seen the surge of cryptocurrency and especially Bitcoin making an impact on the way criminals are moving money?
Oh, for sure, criminals are using Bitcoin, virtual currencies of all types to launder proceeds of crime. And there's a very good saying out there that I truly believe in. If you find a technology that's not abused by criminals, you found a bad technology, right? and like when checks first came out, criminals abused checks, and when email money transfers, they're still being abused. But for some reason, people blame crypto more than they blame email money transfers, more than they blame checks. And have we seen an increased use of Bitcoin or virtual currencies? Yes. There's been a couple of great studies, though, and yes, I understand that these studies are based on unknown factors, like when you're trying to determine how much money is laundered through Bitcoin, for instance, versus how much money is laundered through trade-based money laundering. And the difference is like the estimates are around 50 billion for Bitcoin, and it's in the trillions for trade-based money laundering. But what I think happens is, and this is me being maybe a little conspiratorial, or when you get trained over the years, you get trained in money laundering, and people make money and they do courses and they want to write. But if every year they run the same training on bulk cash smuggling, then nobody's going to go back to the courses anymore. So they have to find the new big thing, right? The new big sexy, the new big fun thing. And that right now it's Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. Who knows what it'll be in 5 years. But we still haven't stopped bulk cash smuggling, right? There's still a massive amount of cash being bulk smuggled. We stopped talking about that because it doesn't sell to at training events anymore.
And what percentage of the money that gets laundered do you think gets reported? Would it be like in the high 50s or the low 10s? What's it?
That I don't think I don't think anyone can accurately answer that. Some of the best think tanks of the world come up with numbers, but I mean, if you've properly laundered money, you can't tell it's laundered, right? So it's very easy to do, especially in Canada with privacy and we don't have a transparent business registry, so it's quite easy in Canada to hide it. And once you've hidden it well, it can't count. So they probably use some really good algorithmic patterns to make that determination. But I honestly think that no one really knows the true value of what's laundered. We know it's 2 to 3% of the world's GDP. We know it's massive, and we know that in Canada alone, if we were to stop money laundering, we would take a massive hit to our GDP. Because it's so big. But how much it is specifically, I don't think you can really put a number on it.
And do you think certain sectors are more vulnerable than others when it comes to money laundering? Like, for example, I know, as a matter of fact, in India, real estate is one sector where a lot of black money gets parked because like people would just use their black money or illegal money to buy property, and that also leads to inflation. That also leads to rising real estate prices. So is it something similar in Canada, and are there any other sectors where you see that get more impacted by money laundering?
I mean, by impact, there's sort of two different impacts. One, abused by money launderers, and then get that effective, like the effect of that money laundering, even whether it's positive or negative, right? For sure, in Canada, real estate is a massive draw for money laundering because our real estate prices are stable, they're growth driven, and it's easy to find nominee owners. It's easy to find a willing participant in the real estate side or the mortgage broker side or the private lending side. It's easy to find those. If you approach 10 people with enough money, one person's going to have the lowest moral value to say, yes, okay, it's fine. And so does that drive up prices? Yes, I think there's other foreign influences that drive up prices. You know, the money out of China, because there's a lot of wealth in China, that money coming to Canada, buying properties. I'm sure there's a lot of wealthy people in India that are bringing their money over to Canada because we're such a solid, good regime. And that's legal money, right? So the legal money plus the illegal money, you know, most definitely will drive up houses in certain areas. But if you think about the import-export business and the world of import-export, I think that is abused just as much as the real estate sector. And anytime you have the ability to create an invoice or something that may or may not have moved, and then if you think about consulting, right? Okay, listen, I'm going to consult you. I'm going to send you a bill for $100,000 for consulting. How do you measure that, right? And you send me $100,000 to pay my consultant's fees, then maybe you just bought 10 keys of Coke. Right, like it's that easy when you think about the tangible ones. We could spot them if we have enough boots on the ground, training experience, and trade-based money laundering, understanding the cost of goods and how goods flow. But then you look at just consultancy. That would be, if I'm going to launder money, I'm going to set up a consultancy group, and I'm going to send you an invoice for whatever you owe me for my drugs, and we're going to agree that I consulted on our businesses, and we move the money, and the banks will see an invoice, and everyone's happy.
Well, that's a very interesting perspective. And I mean, I can understand that there are ways to spot, and then there are ways where you just cannot do anything to figure out what's money laundering and what's clean. So that brings me to the next question, where you are also the lead financial crimes investigator for the Mass Casualty Commission. So can you tell us a little bit about that? What was the commission about? And without compromising the investigation, what unique challenges would an event like that present from a financial crimes perspective?
Yeah, so in April 18th and 19th, 2020, an individual who I will not give the privilege of his name killed 21 people in rural Nova Scotia, very small Nova Scotia. Where everyone felt safe. Mm-hmm. And the federal and provincial government set up a commission of inquiry to determine why and how this happened, and could we have spotted it, and what can we do to stop it from happening again. And so my job as the lead financial crime investigator was to look to see, was there any sort of financial crime taking place that should have been captured within Canada's Financial Intelligence Unit. So should the banks have reported to FinTrack? Should FinTrack have reported to law enforcement? Should law enforcement have done something to mitigate, to maybe spot this before it happened from a financial crime perspective? And my other job was to see, was there any organized crime involvement, any drug trafficking involvement, and how he was able to create a mock replica of an RCMP vehicle. And so how he was able to do that without anyone reporting it to the police. How was he able to get all the parts? How was he able to pay for all those parts? So it was interesting because, as I say this out loud, it was very unlikely for me to actually succeed in saying, that financial crime played a role and that the bank could have spotted it. He was a professional. He owned a professional business that had been in business for a while. He cheated on his taxes, but I don't think there's a small business owner in Canada that doesn't cheat on their taxes to some extent. He may have unreported $30,000 or $40,000 a year in income. Like, it wasn't massive tax fraud. He did have fairly large deposits into his bank accounts, but those were as a result of inheritances, so they had some legal, background to them. There was really nothing there that suggested that the Canada's financial intelligence system could have spotted this in the future. And there was nothing he was doing financially that made it, we'd love to have a pattern of analysis of every mass casualty that's ever happened to see if their financial transactions have a similarity somewhere. Yeah. Right? We haven't done that. But if you think about the data we have from Canada, from the US, you think about what just happened in Australia, which was devastating and horrible. If we could examine the financial patterns of all those and throw it into some really smart computer and let that computer say, listen, over the 3 years prior to this event, these were similar factors in their bank accounts. That'd be an fascinating exercise, and one that I think would maybe help banks see something that's coming and report it.
Yeah. And did that experience have an impact on your current work in prevention?
I was a policeman for 27 years, so I'd already saw a lot of really bad stuff and bad things happen. What this did, I think it reinvigorated me on the importance of financial crime pretty much in every crime, because most crimes are committed for some sort of financial gain. Right? So it really did reinvigorate that belief that I have, and the feeling that, hey, this job that I do now, even though I'm working in the financial system, I'm not kicking in doors and chasing bad guys, I'm not restraining cars and houses, it still has value because the crime that's out there, people are doing it to make money. Right? And if you could stop the flow of that money, if you could find that money, report it to the government, if the system worked perfectly, right, I would file a report to FinTrack on somebody at my credit union that just laundered $100,000. And they would send that report to the local police department. And that local police department had the capacity then, right, to start an investigation into that member and then seize the funds and arrest the member. But if you think about how it should work, it should be very meaningful. And I think the commission showed me the value of what could happen.
So now at the credit union, how do you ensure compliance with constantly evolving regulations? Because like the financial sector is the hotbed of new regulations, and I'm pretty sure it's not just Canada, it's a global thing. So one, how do you try and ensure compliance, and how do you keep a credit union competitive while maintaining robust AML controls?
People ask that question all the time, and I say this all the time. My answer is compliance should never get in the way of business.
Yeah.
Unless that business is outside of our risk appetite. Your CAMLO, your anti-money laundering officer, does not have the training and experience necessary to build a compliance program around that business. So if my CEO came to me and said, Dwayne, we want to bank business B. Okay, no problem. I would do a risk assessment of that business, and I would say, okay, boss, you want to bank them? No problem. Here's what we need to do. And here's what it's going to cost to do that. Sometimes it's cost prohibitive. Very rarely is it cost prohibitive. Sometimes it's cost prohibitive. But most times the CEO will say, okay, great. Thank you. So you say yes and, you don't say no but. And because you say yes and the CEO and the commercial team and all the people there that are trying to build business, all the retail team are seeing that you're not trying to stand in the way of business, they include you more. And by including you more, you have better oversight into compliance and making sure we're compliant. And so it's funny because, don't tell compliance you're going to say no. And that's driven, I think, by the fact that a lot of compliance officers don't have the ability, or they don't have the authority. Right? So at my credit union, I have full support from the CEO and the board. If I say I don't think it's a good idea, they agree with me. They know that I'm trying hard to move business. And so if I say no, they know it's a problem. But a lot of credit unions don't have that support. And I say to those CAMLOs, those anti-money laundering professionals, leave and go find a place that's going to appreciate your worth.
And did you find any differences when you worked in South Africa and Tajikistan, who may not be as advanced as a nation as Canada, but like did you see them, the developing nations, tackling these money laundering issues in a different way, grounded more in their own reality?
I mean, I think they're where we were 10 years ago, right? They're developing. Tajikistan is working. They have a lot of banks, and they need to sort of amalgamating banks, and banks are pushing back on the know your member, know your customer sort of regimes that are in place. But so were ours, right? Every time we introduce, like right now, we've introduced vehicle leasing and financing into the PCML TFA. Last year, it was mortgage brokers were introduced into the PCML TFA. Every time you introduce someone else, there's pushback and there's non-compliance until they force them in. So Tajikistan has a great program. It's FATF based. They've got great rules. They've got really good FIU. It's small. It's emerging. It's growing, but they're doing great. I think the same thing with South Africa. I think these countries understand the value, even if it's from an economic sense. Because if you're gray listed by FATF, or you're seen as a poor AML money laundering regime, anti-money laundering regime, then banks won't do business with you. Your cost of borrowing goes up. All these bad things happen, right, from an economic standpoint. So whether it's because they really want to fight financial crime, or they were trying to protect their own economic interests, I don't care. It does the same goal, right? So I think both countries are pushing hard. Both countries, that's why they're bringing in experts like myself and a number of other people to help them develop their AML programs, help to develop the regulatory regime. A lot of them want to understand, okay, how do we deal with cryptocurrencies? Do we ban it? Yeah. Do we regulate it? They're asking all the right questions, and they're learning from all the countries that have already made all these mistakes. I often go to these training sessions and listen, I'm going to tell you what we do. It's not because they're doing it right. I want you to do better, right? Because you're developing from the ground up, right? When you're building from the ground up, let's say it's in hurricane, you saw the building beside you get destroyed. Well, now when you build your building, you can build it better, right? Based on what you've learned from that other building. So same thing. You've seen countries, you've seen banks, you've seen lots of penalties being given out. So, okay, this is what got this country gray listed 5 years ago. So let's not do that. Let's do better, right? Let's stop the hurricane from hitting us.
So, are there any common misconceptions about money laundering that you have seen? And I'm asking you to base this answer on the training that you have done for police officers, for bank executives across multiple countries. Are there any common misconceptions that you've seen to prevail across the board?
I think from a banking perspective, we're getting better in it, but I think there's still that belief that it doesn't happen. It's not going to happen to me.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's no one launders money through us. We're a small credit union. No, people are abusing you. People are abusing. Everyone's getting abused by money launderers. No one is exempt, right? From the law enforcement side, I think it's trying to convince, and we still have not got there yet, but we're working on it, possibly, that you have to spend the money on the proceeds of crime investigations, on the asset forfeiture, on the seizure, not on the corner drug dealers. The problem is that, and I'm no different than this, so I'm not casting judgment on anyone when I say this, but we live in our 8-foot world. I want a speed bump in my street if people are speeding. I want the drug dealer on my corner arrested. I want to know when my kids walk to school, they're going to be safe. I don't care if some Colombian cartel or traditional organized crime group are getting rich. Yeah. I don't live in it. I don't see the value of that. I don't see that just arresting that drug dealer is not going to stop drug trafficking. Someone else is going to be there next week. That if I want to stop drug trafficking, I have to leave him there and I have to follow the money up to the top and then get the top gone. Because once the top's gone, that person is no longer employable by anyone. But then, of course, someone else is going to replace them. It's going to start again. But it's hard because the elected officials listen to their constituents. Their constituents live in this 8-foot world. And the constituents want that 8-foot world safe. And we're human. It's no different, right? So it's hard to convince people that we have to ignore that immediate threat because we can't really get rid of it. We can just, push it down the road a little bit, or maybe we can let it go. It'll come back a week later. We have to think the long game, which is taking out the top. And that's a lot different resourcing. That's a lot different training, education for law enforcement. And I don't think we're quite there yet because people still live, and rightly so, in their 8-foot world.
Mm-hmm. So what advice would you then have for attorneys who are working on these cases where they want to bring in a financial crimes expert? When should they go and engage one? And what general advice would you have for attorneys in these cases?
It's going to cost you money, right? Mm-hmm. On the Crown perspective, right? So we're going to call them the good guys because I was a policeman. On the Crown perspective, they don't have the budget. So to their leadership, I would say start giving people budgets for forensic accountants and for money laundering experts. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is our Crown attorneys are overworked and under-resourced, and they will often withdraw the money laundering charge to get the predicate offense because no one cares if you've been convicted of money laundering. They care if you've been convicted with drug trafficking or gun running or human trafficking or child exploitation, right? And so on the Crown attorney side, I would say start really getting some good training and experience around your professional money launderers and try to get some charges and convictions on the professional money launderer that are moving millions and hundreds of millions of dollars and making 8 to 10% on it, versus arresting your drug dealer for drug trafficking and then charging of money laundering because he may have put $100,000 in drug money in his bank, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about civil asset forfeiture in a moment. But if I go back to defense counsels, on a defense counsel side, you're going to want to engage your forensic accountant and your money laundering expert early if you're trying to counter an opinion that the Crown already has, mm-hmm. right? And because it is not, the forensic accountant is going to take you a while, and then the money laundering expert utilizes the information from the forensic accountants to drive their money laundering opinion. So you got like one flows from the other, so it's really planning ahead. Same thing on the Crown side. You need it. You got to get it in there early so you can make sure you have all the right people. But I don't think it's going to be a silver bullet, because it's not, right? It's going to be something that's going to help inform the trier of fact or the jury, but it's still some of the way money moves can be very complex and hard to explain, especially when it's tied into legitimate business. Mm-hmm. And so So I just want to jump into civil asset forfeiture a minute because that's a very powerful thing around the world. And I think we have to do much better at civil asset forfeiture. Some of our provinces in Canada are doing really well at it. Some of them are not. And so we have to expand that civil asset forfeiture regime across Canada and make sure globally they have that really good civil asset forfeiture and almost stop worrying about criminal asset forfeiture because it's a lot of work to convince a judge to forfeit your house, your bank account, your car. It's much easier in that civil regime. And I think that's where we need to start moving towards that separation of the predicate offense from the assets made from that predicate offense. And then we'll be a lot more successful at getting both.
Mm-hmm. And Dwayne, as we move into the last segment of the podcast, I want to go back to your tomatoes and lettuce analogy. When you talk about these different courses and certifications, and again, like the lettuce and the tomato is good, but are there any courses and certifications that you feel can be the meat of the burger, where a financial expert, like these are some of the courses that experts must take to boost their credibility, to establish their credibility? And secondly, how important is ongoing training and conference participation, and generally staying up to date with the technology, the latest developments in financial technology?
That's a whole bunch of questions in one. So let's start with the end because that was the easiest one to answer, I think. So, I mean, staying up to date is mandatory, right? Your expertise very quickly dies off in a world where financial crime changes every day. Right, so you have to stay updated through read case law, look at the releases from various governments because the governments put out intelligence bulletins all the time. If someone gets arrested, the U.S. is really good at releasing information about arrests and charges, and their indictments are released, and they talk a lot about how the money was laundered. Stay up to date on all those things. It's very important. And if you talk about courses and accreditations, I have a bunch, right? Mm-hmm. And I think every one of them gave me some different level of value. But together they add this holistic view, right? So as a money laundering expert, do I really need to understand what the Wolfsburg Group does or the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision? Probably not. But does it help me talk about money globally? Does it make me more holistic as a money laundering investigator, understanding really the different global approaches? I think it does. So I don't think there's any bad courses. I do think you need to not only get like your ACAMS or ACFCS, your Canadian securities course or a course around Canadian securities or how securities work in whatever your country is. Now you're getting into a whole different world of banking. We're talking about the movement of securities. Now, there's tons of money laundered through securities. There's tons of fraud committed in securities. But I find very few investigators have that securities course, an accredited course on how securities work. Because it goes back to that lawful versus unlawful again, right? If you don't know how securities are supposed to work, how can you say they're unlawful? So I think conference participations, they look good on your CV. They make you appear updated. Be picky about your conferences. They're not all created equal. To me, those conferences are about networking and meeting people that you can share information with. And I think a 2-day conference where it was just a bunch of tables of experts, we're going to have a table here around how to do customer due diligence. We're going to have a table here around how to spot trade-based money laundering. And you have 10 people sit there and just talk about what they see. I think that's be far more valuable a conference for 2 days than listening to someone talk about some abstract 10,000-foot view on things that I don't think are quite as important.
Mm-hmm. So as you're working full-time with the WFCU Credit Union right now, so are you still taking cases as an expert witness? And what is your availability currently for taking on new cases?
I would have to get permission from work to do, but I would not be adverse to doing weekends and evenings work. I find them fascinating. I really enjoy them. So I would say yes. I'm not sure if I would do defense counsel work. It would really have to depend on the case. I'm not sure I would want to go down that road. I've never, had the opportunity or been asked. But I really enjoy this side of my life, the expert witness side. I would love to do more of it. And I think that work would allow me, as long as it's not an obvious conflict. Like I couldn't write an expert opinion against a credit union. Right? There would
be a conflict.
Yeah, there would be some, because you have to be, whatever it takes on, I have to be completely and absolutely unbiased, right? That's the number one thing for any witness. Any expert witness, you cannot be seen as biased. Yeah. The second you have a bias, your credibility is gone forever. Your opinion can't be biased. You can't be biased. You can't have a hint of bias. And so, that's where I think that, I got to make sure that fits in as well because of my current role. But yeah, I do enjoy it. I'd love to do it. I got approached to do one for the RCMP. I don't know if we're going to get down that road yet. It's a fraud related one, which I think would be fascinating. And we'll see where that goes. And if they come forward and say, yes, Dwayne, we'd like you to do it, then I'd approach my leadership and say, listen, the RCMP have asked me to do this. It will be done on the weekends. It will not be done during work time. Do you have an issue with me doing this? And let them decide. And my plan is to stay updated. My plan is to keep growing my expertise. Because in 2 or 3 years when I'm done full-time work, that's when I'll probably put the shingle out in front of the door and make myself a lot more available and really start to drive my face in the market for doing expert opinions. So up until then, though, I'm just building that. I'm adding more lettuce and tomato. Maybe I'm putting ketchup and mustard and relish, right? I'm putting all the rest of the stuff on that burger.
That's excellent. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch?
I think LinkedIn's probably the best way because email addresses change and phone numbers change, but I'm regularly active on LinkedIn. So you can just look for the really good-looking bald guy on LinkedIn, and you'll see me sometimes on the treadmill giving advice out on the treadmill in the morning, or you'll see me just talking about some of the stuff I see in the news from a money laundering perspective. But that's the easiest way. I love talking to people about this stuff. It's a fascinating world. It's a world that's not slowing, it's growing. And the problem I think we have in the industry right now is that we don't have enough expertise, right? The policing is finally getting into the area of hiring civilian experts, which is great. So now you think, okay, I don't want to be a policeman. I don't want to carry guns and kick in doors and chase bad guys, but I do want to be in policing. So I'm going to join as a civilian expert on their money laundering asset forfeiture side. So what courses do I take? Well, you take your accounting courses, right? You take your Canadian securities course. So that's going to put you outside of something else because we need to start getting that civilian expertise into the policing world because you don't need to carry a gun to write a production order to a bank. You don't need to have a bulletproof vest to serve a production order at a bank, right? You don't need these things, right? So I think that's very important to get that civilian expertise in the room. And the RCMP are hiring now civilian investigators. I think Toronto police are as well. The globe is going that way because it just makes more sense.
That's definitely the case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add your LinkedIn to the show notes so that anybody who listens to this and wants to connect with you on social media, stay in touch, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn. And as you said, the email changes. Probably once you are more available, you can come back on the podcast. We'll talk more about what other layers of tomatoes and lettuce have you added to your hamburger. And thank you so much, Dwayne, for letting us into your world, showing us how money laundering, what money laundering issues are impacting Canada, but also other countries in the world. This was really useful. I know you're short on time today, but we definitely hope to do this again sometime.
Yeah, and happy to come back on and maybe we get into the details of some of the actual opinions I've written and how I formulated that and how the lettuce and tomato and the rest of the burger helped get me to that opinion, because I think stories are always fascinating to tell, especially police stories. And so we tell the backstory, and then we can really get into that. This is how I formulated that opinion. This is how I drafted that opinion. This is what it looked like at the end.
Yeah, we'll definitely hope to have you back.
Perfect. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, have a great day. Thank you. Bye, everyone. If you found this podcast useful, remember to subscribe and give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. This will help other users find this podcast and benefit from the insights shared by our guests. If you'd like to be featured as a guest on this show, please write to media@xlightum.com. See you in the next episode.